All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Election 2024. So I heard a rumor this week. I don't know if it's true. Maybe you guys can help me. I heard a rumor that there is going to be a presidential election coming up soon in a short amount of time. Can't confirm that, but apparently that is what's going on. Of course, it's definitely happening. And we are going through some of the biggest issues. The issue on the slate for tonight is the issue of abortion. This is obviously a very, I would say it's a very personal issue. It's also a very passionate issue, and it's an issue that has been hotly debated over the last 5 decades, at least 5 decades, 5 decades plus. And I think the way kind of people frame it typically is that there's two camps. You have pro-choice, you have pro-life, and I'm not commenting on the framing or the phrasing of those two sides of the issue. I don't know if that is an accurate way to kind of portray it or not. I don't know if even those words. Sorry.
United States pro-choice, pro-life.
Right. No, the only challenge that I find is like it might be offensive to someone who is pro-choice to say that the other side is pro-life. Well, what does that mean that I am? I'm not I'm also pro-life, but I have a different understanding. No, that's not. It's not offensive. Okay.
No, that.
Well, whatever. So no, I'm just, here's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is hey, Mark, good to see you. What I'm saying is that I don't know about the semantics. What I do know is that clearly there are roughly, two opinions on this. One that leans more toward the choice side, i.e. allowing for abortion freely. The other side that has a sense of greater restriction, et cetera, maybe even total, banning of abortions. And obviously goes without saying that this has been a very hotly debated issue over the decades. Recently, with the reversal of the Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, this has thrown this issue once again into public discourse, and now it's back in the States. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But what I think is important is to understand with this issue that there is some Jewish wisdom that may be able to help. That is really the goal of this entire series, is to take an issue that has been kind of framed a certain way in the United States and to say, okay, let's just remove all framing and let's just look at this from a Jewish perspective. What does Jewish wisdom have to say about the issue of abortion? What are the considerations? What are the parameters? What are the conversations about it? The cool thing about looking at things from a Jewish perspective, it's way older than any American perspective possible. How old is the US? 250 years, roughly 250 years, right? We're coming up in 2026 to the 250th year of the US. Great. Torah is 3,300 years old. That's like many times more than 250 years old. 250 is like, I don't know. It's like Torah would say, I have socks older than the United States. That's what, if Torah could speak and if Torah wore socks, Torah would say, I have socks older than the United States. Again, something like that. The point is that there are literally thousands of years of Jewish scholarship and very reasoned scholarship. So tonight we look at the topic of the issue of abortion from a, I think, very uniquely Jewish perspective. And I think it's going to be illuminated. So let's jump in. The way I have this is I prepared this handout with, once again, a bunch of texts. I think we have 5-6 pages of stuff. And I have throughout the class, I have a number of case studies. There are actually 4 different case studies that in the text. I don't have them all marked as case study 1, 2. I have 1, 2, and then whatever. But we have a few case studies and a lot of text to explore, discuss, maybe even debate. But that's the whole point of Torah conversation, is that we get to do this. We get to look at original sources and explore them. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to start with the first case study. And I am going to read the case studies. Actually, no, we'll go around and read them. Let's just do it old school. Dasi, I'll ask you to read, but give me 1 second. Let me pull this up for our online crew. Case study number 1, please take it away.
Dina is expecting her third child when her husband suffers a massive stroke. It is uncertain if he will live, but even if he survives, the road to recovery will be arduous and the final outcome is uncertain. Although she very much wanted this child before this tragedy struck, she has 2 other children to raise and a husband hovering between life and death. Carrying a baby to term seems too overwhelming. May she abort the fetus?
Okay, so here we have a scenario, right? Scenario is what we just read. And then the question at the end, may she abort the fetus? Now that may sound like a,
80 days that she.
well, not only that, I would say even the question itself is weird. Like, may she abort? What do you mean, may she abort? According to who? Like, what's the, like, who are we asking, right? Like, what's
Jewish law.
well, so the truth is, what I really want to do is just kind of present these questions, not necessarily to open up a conversation or a debate, but really to have for us to think about the question of if we were to kind of create laws or to think about parameters. Like, would this be a situation where we would say, yes, it makes sense that abortion should be, okay, greenlit, et cetera, or do we have other feelings on the topic? And again, I don't know that we have to get into a debate here, but again, this is the reason why we have these case studies is because we'll see as Judaism looks at it, there may be some differences in different cases. So that's case study 1, and the question, may she abort the fetus? And that's the question that comes in the heels of that case. Now, let's take a look at case study number 2. Mira, take it away. Second case.
While Rachel is pregnant, it is discovered that she is harboring a malignant tumor that threatens to metastasize due to the hormones caused by pregnancy. If she carries the baby to term, it will likely be too late to treat her. May she abort the fetus?
Okay, so what is the difference between case study 1 and case study 2 vis-a-vis the thought, the desire, maybe the need to abort? What do we think? What's the difference? Which one? That's second one's to save the mother's life. The first one would be, how would we characterize that?
Emotional.
Good. Difficulty. The first one is a case of difficulty. And when it comes to difficulty, obviously there are degrees of difficulty, and we could have a scenario that is difficult, very difficult, extremely difficult, overwhelmingly difficult, or it could even be at the point where mentally, psychologically, emotionally, where it's actually could be dangerous. So right, there's a situation where it could be so dangerous for one's internal well-being that it almost mirrors case study 2, which is a physical, right, where there's there's cancer involved. So that is so there could be a case like case study 1 that goes to that level. But again, case study 1 is presented as it's presented. Case study 2 is as it is presented. So again, the question is, may she abort the fetus? And I would ask you this, without getting into personal feelings and such, which case do you think more people would say, let's allow the abortion? What would you say? Case study 2, right? We would say most, yeah, Janice.
The first one is also dependent on where she is in pregnancy. There's no
Correct.
If she's 3 weeks pregnant, it's a different scenario than if she's 7 months.
Let me repeat that just to make sure everybody online hears. So we have, Janice is pointing out, there's a distinction, there may be a distinction between how early in the pregnancy are we talking? We're talking 3 weeks, or we're talking 6 months in. Like where in the pregnancy are we talking about? And that's a very important point, which we will explore tonight as well. Okay, so that's a little bit of opening and kind of get us to think about different scenarios and perhaps different permutations of the application of halacha. Like I said, this course in general is about looking at things from a Jewish perspective. I think we have a unique case tonight that we're looking at, case or topic or issue that we're looking at, the issue of abortion, because it is very well discussed in Jewish law and in Jewish sources. It is like legitimately very well discussed. At the same time, there is a variance of opinion, as we'll see tonight. So it's very interesting to explore this from many different levels, a medical perspective, a legal perspective, analytical perspective. It's going to be a fascinating area of discourse. All right, 1 second. Okay, so the next step is the following. There is one source and only one source in the Mishnah that talks about abortion directly. And just to give a quick background on this, what is the Mishnah, you might be wondering? The Mishnah is, so if you've heard of Talmud, right, Gemara, so the Gemara, the Talmud elaborates and explains and kind of opens up the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is really the first emergence of the oral law, of the oral Torah. So we have the written Torah, 5 books of Moses, and and totaling 24 books of scripture, known as Tanakh. And then you have all of the other stuff. And all of the other stuff could be commentary on Torah or backstories that are not written, but that we have in tradition. It could be details of the mitzvot that we have written, but aren't explained. So for example, the Torah says to put on tefillin. Well, what does that look like? It doesn't say what it is, it's wrapped tefillin. Okay? Well, we know there are black box straps that look sometimes suspicious in an airport. I've been stopped many times, like, what is that? And I'm like, well, it's tefillin. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, so we're gonna take a look. Anyway, but like it doesn't, we have it, it's called Halacha L'Moshe Sinai. We have it on tradition. This is what God told Moses, Moses told us, and there's never been another, it's fascinating, there's never been another tradition as to what tefillin are. Despite all the denominations of Judaism, and I say denominations because whatever, like I'm not a big denomination guy, although they tell a joke about the lady who goes into the post office before Hanukkah and asks for some Hanukkah stamps. And they say, in what denomination? And she says, oh, even stamps have different denominations. Terrible. That's my denomination joke. But anyway, the point is that
I'm
despite
gonna laugh as your mother.
Sorry?
I'm gonna laugh as your mother.
Thank you very much. Call that a mercy laugh. Anyway, so a joke. Oh, maybe we'll phrase it. A joke only a mother could laugh at, or yeah. So despite all the variance in Jewish practice, I don't believe there's ever been another version of tefillin. No one's ever said, actually, I think it should be pink.
It's just a different rule when people change the tefillin in the morning. People with 2 sets of tefillin.
Oh.
They
The
wrap
two,
it.
yeah, no, the two. So there's Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. There's a slight variance as far as the order of the parashiot of the chapters. So some, including Chabad, we put on 2 pairs of tefillin. You know, but it's a slight variation. But as to the core, like, what is tefillin? Like, are they black boxes with leather straps? Or are they pink, hot pink, round cylinder
With bows.
plastic-like things? I mean, like, there's Velcro, right? I mean, there's never been another, because, so my point is that these certain things are called Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, which means that when Moses gave us the Torah, he's like, here's the transcription. He said, and he said at the same time, and here's what it means. I'm not going to leave you hanging. Imagine Jews. Since when would Jews accept a document and not question the document? Imagine the document says, put on tefillin. And he says, here you go. And they're like, yes, dude in the back. What's tefillin? Sorry, can't answer that. I got to run. I got more rocks to hit. Like, what's he going to do? Of course he answered the question. Of course he knew what it meant. So every mitzvah was explained. But where's it written? It wasn't written down until many years later, after the passing of Moses and after the centuries of Jewish history. It was always taught orally from teacher to student, generation after generation, and that was done intentionally. It was done in order to engage the crowd, engage the audience, engage teacher, student, parent, child, engage and have this dual system of both written notes, as it were, and then the oral explanation, until such time. I'm just giving you background on the Mishnah, which I think is very important. Until such time as the Jewish community became fractured, not fractured spiritually, but fractured physically. This was after the destruction of the Second Temple, and the Jews were exiled to a bunch of different countries. This is when the Romans destroyed the temple, destroyed Jerusalem, razed it essentially to the ground. And now Jews were going to, to Italy and to Africa, just going all over the place. And there was no cohesive Jewish community. And now the question is, Who's going to make sure everybody's remembering all the details? It's not possible. If everyone's together, you got a shot. But now that everyone's around the world, you're going to have, if you have 20 communities, you'll have 20 Judaisms, unless you have a document, right, that writes all this remembered information down so that it doesn't keep on spreading and getting confused and getting forgotten. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, wrote the work that we call the Mishnah. It's the first appearance, first emergence of the oral tradition, the oral law, written down. Later on, a few centuries later, the Talmud is the next work that elaborates on the Mishnah, explains the Mishnah, and takes it further. But it's all writing down the dialogue, these details. So, all to say that in the Mishnah, it actually talks about abortion. Text number 1. Eric, if you don't mind reading text number 1, but give me 1 second, let me pull it up on the screen. All right, take it away, please.
Greater part head was emerged and not be harmed. We do not set aside one life for another.
Now, this is a thank you. Before we get to the discussion questions or question, let's analyze the Mishnah, because that's literally that's what Torah is. We analyze text. So the Mishnah gives a case, and the scenario is a woman who is in labor and has a life-threatening difficulty, which means her life is at risk. Giving birth to this child or this pregnancy continuing for any longer is now a risk to the mom. Says the Mishnah without any equivocation, clearly and absolutely, 1 dismembers the embryo within her, limb by limb, etc. Now, the reason why the Mishnah is so graphic, which is a bit graphic, or just a portion, the reason why it's so graphic is, as the commentators explain, to tell us that you do whatever is needed to terminate the pregnancy. Even if now we're talking about she's in labor. So this is late, you talking about late stages of pregnancy. This is late stage, not just late stage. This is imminent. Birth is imminent. It hasn't happened. If it happened, there's a different law. Birth has not happened. It's late stage. Her life is at risk. You perform the abortion. There's limbs. It's not a little embryo. It's a fetus. It's a basically fully developed fetus. And it's got limbs. Does not matter. You save the mother's life. For her life, we're just analyzing the text. For her life takes precedence over its life. That is the language of the Mishnah. This is not, just so you know, this is not a text in which one rabbi says this and another rabbi says that. This is one of the Mishnahs where there is no alternative opinion. It's very clear. The abortion is performed. It could be, 40 weeks? Is that 40 weeks does not make a difference. Her life's at risk from the abortion. However, the other scenario, right? There's 2, and I'll just give you a little bit of Talmudic terminology, just, because it's cool to have this. When a Mishnah like this brings 2 cases, a first scenario and then a second scenario, scenario A, scenario B, we call it the Reisha and the Seifa. Just so you know, some Talmudic terminology. Reisha, like Rosh, means the first part, the first. Seifa, like Sof, it's Aramaic, supposed to Hebrew. Seifa is the second half of the Mishnah. So you have the Reisha and the Seifa. The Reisha, the first part, the first scenario is where her life's at risk and the baby is not yet born. Therefore, you do the abortion. In the Seifa, in the second case, once its greater part head has emerged, it may not be harmed, but we do not set aside one life for another, which means, what it means, set aside one life for the other? Well, I mean, that's saying it's a little soft, but what it means is you don't kill someone to save another life. If you're a doctor, right? Let me stop sharing here so we can see everybody. If you're a doctor, okay, and you have 2 patients, and someone's like not doing well, but they've got a good heart, and the other person needs a heart, you don't say, "Hey, can I borrow something?" Like, you don't end one life to save another life. That's not. We don't do that. Now you're thinking, well, how does organ donation happen? If you're donating a heart, it has to still be beating when you pull it out. Well, that's where brain death comes in, and Harvard had an ad hoc panel back in the days, decades ago, to determine that brain death, or they established that brain death is a valid consideration of death. Therefore, it is not immoral to take out a beating heart from one patient, put in the other, because we could call death in another way other than cessation of heart function. All of that is how it's morally justified. No doctor worth their whatever their medical degree and Hippocratic oath taking would ever harm one patient for the sake of another patient. We don't do that. That's not okay. So to end the life of one human to save the life of another human, we don't do that. We don't do that. So therefore, in this case, abortion is not the ending of the life of the newborn child as the head emerges is not okay. So it's once the head starts emerging, that's when, if you want to know when does Judaism call birth, you see it's written right there. Once its greater part, once the head has emerged, it may not be harmed. Now you may ask, well, what do you consider the head emerging? I don't know. They call it crowning. Maybe it's crowning. I don't know. I'm not an expert of these on this level of granularity, but the crowning. Crown.
No.
No?
Crown. No.
Well, the question is if it's a greater part of the head or the greater part of the body, which is the head. But then the question is to how much. Now it could be. I'm sure the commentaries do discuss it. Now that greater part / head. It may not be the greater part of the head, or maybe it could be. Now that I'm thinking, maybe once like. I don't know. We would have to look it up. I don't even want to say anything without having the books in front of me and the commentaries. But sorry,
I don't know if you deal with this. Who wrote it?
we're gonna get there. Now,
Rabbi Ari,
yes,
I hope you don't mind me muddying the water here, but I wanted to ask something that's salient, but it's definitely muddying the water.
sure.
Years ago, I heard the reason to be against cloning was because human beings could be raising clones for spare parts. And how would the Talmud react to that? And I apologize for muddying the water.
My coughing is not because of the question.
Sorry.
Excuse me. Cloning for spare parts.
Right.
That's another issue. I feel like that's another issue.
In other words, you'd be killing the clone for the spare parts for the primary.
I mean, that gets into the issue of what makes life. Is a clone. I don't know.
Yeah, but that was an issue years ago. I mean, now the technology is such that we've been able to successfully grow partial organs basically in a lab without having to have a full-blown organism to create the organ. So I think that's becoming less of a question.
Mark, nothing to worry about.
15
We'll
years
just grow the spare part. Thank you, Dr. Maxey, for clarifying. By the way, this is a clone. The other Rabbi Ari is another lesson. I'm kidding. All right. So here we go. This is the psak. This is the ruling of the Mishnah. It is unequivocal. It's very clear. In other words, there are some, I don't know, religions, I guess that would take an absolute no stance to abortion. It's very clear Jewish law is, not only is abortion permitted, I think this is very important. It's not only saying that abortion is permitted, it's saying that abortion is mandatory in the case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't say that if this is the scenario, then one may dismember, one may perform the abortion. No, it says one should. I mean, it doesn't say the word should, but it says this is what one does, i.e., it is basically mandatory. Now, if we're using text 1, which is the only original source in Jewish law in the Mishnah, if we take text 1 as like the source and we apply it to our 2 case studies, how might we apply it? Now, if we look at case study 1, right? What was case study 1? Case study 1 was
the father
Dina,
had the stroke.
Yeah, so the husband has a stroke and she has a few kids, and she seems like it is too overwhelming to have this child, to allow this pregnancy to go to term, and to have this baby. So does text 1 that we just read, does that apply? What do we think?
That it doesn't apply, and I don't think it provides guidance because we don't know how far along she is.
Right. Okay. So it doesn't apply directly. Why doesn't it apply? I would say probably because the text 1 of the Mishnah is a situation where there is a life, she's in labor and there's life-threatening difficulty. We also don't know, case study 1, how overwhelming is overwhelming, like I mentioned before, how far along she is, etc. Now, case study 2 was the case where Rachel is pregnant. She is harboring a malignant tumor that threatens to metastasize due to hormones caused by a pregnancy. And the doctor is saying, you must terminate the pregnancy or else you may die, which means that the pregnancy is a threat to her life and well-being. Now, does it seem like the Mishnah might apply to that case? It does seem like that, right? It seems like that might be a better fit. So if we were to assume that case study 1 is not a life-threatening, overwhelming situation, it's just, I mean, I don't know what the right term to say is, but a mid-level overwhelming. What does that mean? It's like overwhelming, but not like life-threatening overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And we would say that the Mishnah is talking about a case of life-threatening danger to the mom. Then we might say that the Mishnah does not apply to case study 1, but would apply to case study 2, where her life is literally at risk. The cancer with the hormones of pregnancy, it's not a good recipe. The pregnancy must be terminated. That's the medical perspective. That seems a more clear-cut case. Yes, you do the abortion. Case study 1, likely halacha would say, it seems, at least at this point, that maybe not. The twist is case study 3. This is where it gets very interesting. Okay, and it's very important that we go through this carefully and slowly to understand the nuances. And also, I just want to say this: part of these classes is not just necessarily arriving at like a solution or conclusion, but it's also exploring the process of how we take original text, apply it, analyze it. It's a fascinating process. So here we have a real case that came before a rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Halperin, and he wrote about it in a book called Responsa, called Maaseh Choshev. That's the name of his book. Not the responsive part. It's called Maaseh Choshev. It's a book of halachic response. So basically, he wrote a book containing questions and answers on interesting areas of Jewish law that he received in his career as a rabbi in Israel. So here's a real case study. Am I reading it? No, Frank, you read it. Yeah.
Anne, who suffers from bone marrow cancer, needs a transplant and finds only one matching donor, her pregnant sister Leah. In order to perform the procedure without endangering Leah's life, an abortion is needed. Whose life takes precedence?
Okay, let's break this down for a second, because this is a twist. It's not case study 1, it's not case study 2, it's case study 3, but it's also a twist. What's happening here is you have 2 sisters. One is suffering from bone marrow cancer. She needs a transplant. And her sister, Leah, is a match. But her sister, who could be the donor, is pregnant. In order for her to be a donor, she would have to abort her pregnancy, terminate her pregnancy. And so now the question is, whose life takes precedence? The life, as it were, of Leah's pregnancy, the life of the fetus, or the life of her sister. Now, I want to ask you this question. I'm trying to find in my head the right way to frame it. I think I have a way to frame it. In which way is case study 3 similar to the Mishnah's case? In which case is it dissimilar to the Mishnah's case? How is it similar to the Mishnah's case? Okay, good. There is a life at risk, right? Case study 1, again, we're assuming it's overwhelming, but it's not life-threatening. Case study 2 was a life-threatening risk to the mom. Case study 3, a life is at risk, but it's not the mom's life. It's the mom's sister, right? So on the one hand, what's at stake is not just how difficult life is. What's at stake is life. It's a life and death question, right? Somebody may die. Who's the sister? Anne. Anne may die if she doesn't get the transplant. Her sister could be the donor, but her sister's pregnant and can't be a donor with the pregnancy. So if the pregnancy is not terminated, it may stand to bring about the demise of Anne. So human life is at risk. On the one hand, that's how it's similar to the Mishnah's case. On the other hand, it is dissimilar in that the one whose life is at risk is not the mother, but is a third party. So now the question is, can we apply the Mishnah's very specific case where the pregnancy is endangering the life of the mother? Can we apply that to a case where the pregnancy is endangering not the life of the mother, but in a sort of like a little bit indirect way, the life of the mother's sister?
Well, I have my first view of it. So if you read text one, though, I would say no, because it says if a woman in labor has a life difficulty and finds that of the is that her life
Good.
difficulty, not that of the party.
Okay.
Or fetus. However, again, I can't keep going back to it, but it's how far along she is. And if she's just pregnant and this happens and she aborts, I think there's a question of when, I hate to do the when is this a person?
Mm-hmm. Which we'll talk about, soon.
Which
When does life begin? When the kids graduate medical school?
no, a rabbi, priest, minister taught me what it's like.
Yeah.
Priest said to me, what it's a conception. That's just they believe when the kids go off to college and it's outside.
There you go. There you go. All right. Good.
If the translation is correct.
Yeah.
The verse 2 take precedence over its life.
Mhm.
So they never refer to the child or the baby. It's an it.
Oh, I don't know if that's a good point, but I don't know if that's in the original.
United States, in some states, they're like moving towards they call fetal personhood. That's the whole problem with the IVF, right? So if life begins at conception, and we're calling this thing a child or a baby, and then IVF, we throw out an egg that's already been birthed.
Sure.
It's murder, right? So then
Right.
calling what you call the fetus is important. So it stood out to me that
It was in it. So I would say that would probably be more of a product of the translation, it as opposed to
doesn't say
a frame.
child.
I don't remember the language. Wish I had the Hebrew here in front. Oh, you have it? Oh, nice. That was quick. All right. See, we could even fact check live, not just like the networks. All right, here we go. Here. Oh, Vlad. It's called the Vlad. Contents of Vlad. Vlad means the fetus or the child fetus. Matzin oso. Him. It's used a male, but him is the general for male or female. Hebrew doesn't have it.
Rabbi
Hebrew
Ari,
doesn't have a neutral. It's either masculine or feminine. The masculine is the more inclusive one that includes both masculine and feminine. Like the it would be him. But anyway, the point is, I understand what you're saying. Him, oto, him. Correct. You know, it says first fetus, and then it says if the fetus is endangering the mother, then you abort him, which is really it, meaning gender neutral, but the fetus.
But they called it fetus.
They called it fetus. Correct.
Like the difference in some of the laws these days.
Yeah, which I think will come up in this conversation. Now, here's
Rabbi
the yeah.
one point, obviously, this is not the mother you're talking about the sister. But on the other, but also, it's even my understanding that bone marrow cancer is very severe and very life-threatening. And it's not a lead pipe cinch that would save the woman's life. It's a hope. Okay. It's a hope, but it's not a lead pipe cinch.
Okay, I hear you. The question is, do we perform the abortion to potentially save a life? Or do we say, no, we can't do the abortion? And it's not a question. I'm not asking a question in thin air. I'm not asking what do we all think? That's not my question. My question is, can we use the Mishnah, text 1, when we use the Mishnah as a proof text one way or the other? And the complicated thing about the Mishnah is the Mishnah definitely says that when fetus threatens life of the mother, you abort. It doesn't say what happens if the fetus threatens a life of the mother's sister, and that becomes an unknown. And as we'll see, let me just cut to the chase. As we'll see, the commentaries on the Mishnah and the Talmud, each of them explaining the rationale of the Mishnah, will lead to a branch, a fork of opinion, where one says it might apply and the other one says it might not apply, as we will see. So we move on to section number 2 of the class, and we ask the question, the big question: when does life begin? Janice, I couldn't have asked anyone better to read this text, because literally you just mentioned this before as the question. You even told the joke. You even told like the joke that almost, I will say, if you say that joke, you almost get honorary rabbi status, because that's like classic rabbinic joke. All right, but text number 2 is a story from the Talmud about the origins of life. When does life begin? Please take it away.
Antoninus asked Rebbe, when is the soul placed into man? Is it from the moment of conception or from the moment of the embryo's formation, i.e. when it takes its human form? Rebbe said from the time of formation. Antoninus said to him, can a piece of meat remain for 3 days without salt and not putrid? Must it not be rather that the soul enters the person at the moment of conception?
It's an interesting dialogue. Thank you. It's an interesting. I will explain it. Basically, Antoninus was this Roman, I don't know, political official. Rebbe, by the way, who's Rebbe? Sorry? Okay, so or at least he was a carnivore. So Rebbe is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the aforementioned rabbi who compiled the Mishnah and was the first one to publish the first work of the oral tradition. So it's very, very highly significant. Anyway, so Antoninus, Rebbe also, he was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, not just the spiritual leader, leading scholar, but he was a leading scholar. He was also very much, with government and politics and everything. He wasn't a political person, but he was someone that had a relationship with Rome. And so we have Antoninus, who must have been a big macher amongst the Romans, who asked Rebbe, when is the soul placed into man? Is it from conception? Or the alternative that he offers is from the moment of the embryo's formation, which we would say is what, how many weeks until it takes on some sort of form? He doesn't say the alternative is birth, but some sort of, I don't know, human form, which again is a moving target. There is gray area there, but that's his question. Rebbe's, well, right, so typically it's 6 weeks or whatever, but okay, Rebbe says time of formation. He gives the latter timeline. Antoninus says, 1 second, you're telling me that there's no soul? There's no, which the soul we believe. Okay, I feel like this should be explained. When a person passes away, we believe that passing away means that the soul leaves the body. Well, then what happens to the body at that point? The moment that happens, moment death happens, a person could have lived for 100 years. They pass away. Once that happens, what happens? The body starts basically decaying, right? It's not trying to be, insensitive here, but that's the reality that happens. In other words, what keeps the body from decaying? It's a soul. That's right. It's the life of the soul. It's the life, but we call that soul. So Antoninus is asking, so when does the soul get placed in it? Rabbi says from the time of formation. Antoninus says, 1 second. So then how, let's say it's 6 weeks. Let's say it's 3 months, whatever timeline you want to put in there, right? How does it stay around for that span of time until the soul comes in? Wouldn't it decay right away? And the example that he uses is meat, right? If meat doesn't have salt, it doesn't have, in this case, what we would call its equivalent of soul, in other words, that which is keeping it going, that which is keeping it fresh, then it's just not going to remain. And so therefore, Antoninus argues, no, we have to say that the soul enters from the time of conception. That is Antoninus's opinion. What's interesting is that in this dialogue, we don't find the Talmud. This is from the Talmud. The Talmud does not record any sort of retort from Rebbe saying, no, I still believe it happens later. It seems like Rebbe may somewhat concede with this, that indeed life begins right away. And that is what seems to be the perspective. that there's a soul, when life begins, that there's a soul that happens right away at conception. And yet, at the same time, we find that there's another Talmudic statement that seems to qualify that, and that's text 3a. Dr. Tepper, please read text 3a. Take it away.
Shema said, fetus inside its mother will die. They teach you.
And that's the tradition of why we have the little indentation there, right, on the lip, is that, oh, that's where the angel, right, tapped us, and we forgot Torah. Interestingly enough, I don't know if the word is ironically, but I would say synchronistically enough, our Kabbalah Cafe class on Sunday quoted this piece of Talmud was a major conversation point, but in a bit of a different direction. But here we see that the Talmud says, the Talmud describes the status of the fetus. Now, what does it mean when it says that a light is lit over its head and it sees from one end of the world to the other? What does that mean, a light is lit over its head? And here we have a commentary, text 3b. Mitch, I'd like to ask you to read, if you will, one more reading. This is from the great Maharal of Prague, who was a great scholar, rabbi, leader, communal leader, and legend has it, creator of the Golem. You ever hear that? The Golem? Little extra bonus accomplishment for him. Text 3b. Take it away. Yeah.
This is the meaning of life. Even though the souls are here.
The Maharal says something incredible. He says, when you look at the Talmud, the Talmudic piece, text 3a from Tractate Nida, the Talmud is expressing the status of the life of the fetus. And it definitely says a light is lit over its head, and the light is not just a light bulb inside that's not what's going on. It's not a physical light, it's a spiritual light, the light of the soul. But the reference is a light is lit over its head, which means that it has a soul, but the soul is not fully integrated. It's like when somebody says, like, that went over my head. What do they mean? They heard it, they were there in the room, but it's not fully integrated in understanding in the mind and the seichel. And so, yeah. And so what the Maharal is saying is that what the Talmud means, again, the commentary explained the Talmud, is that the Talmud is saying that during pregnancy, there is a soul. The soul, in fact, other places in Talmud say that 40 days before conception, the soul is already selected for the unborn.
That's what's gonna ask us, like the pidyon.
Yeah.
Like a pidyon then is. Going through this, but if you miscarried or had an abortion or
Right.
anything within the first 40 days or even the first 3 months, then you still get the pidyon. But if it's longer than that, then you don't. So wouldn't there be an argument then that Judaism believes that the fetus does not form as a human, or the soul does not become part of it until at least 3 months?
So there is, yeah. Right. So there is a, yeah. So there is a. So to your point, what we say is like this: there's a soul from conception, even before conception. There's a soul that's earmarked for the body. In other words, it's earmarked, it's selected, it's matched up, it's paired, and it's there. It's together with the body. However, the integration doesn't happen until full integration happens upon its emergence, quoting the Maharal, It achieves a total union with the body upon its emergence into the world. In other words, at birth, that's when the soul and body fully converge and fully integrate. Soul integrates into body. Up until that point in time, it's a slow process of integration. It's almost like, I don't know, when two companies merge, it's like the branding, what's, so the logo and the colors and who's answering the phones and which website are we using, which platform and which CRM and all that stuff. So like, it's a process of integration until finally it's so seamless, you would never know that there were two different companies to begin with. That's what happens somewhat at birth. Now, the truth is, the honest truth is, that doesn't even fully happen at birth. Judaism believes that soul becomes really integrated upon the naming. For a girl, first opportunity, and for a boy at the Brit. Oh, it's still not fully integrated until the bat mitzvah or the bar mitzvah. There are stages, because if you think about it this way, what does it mean that the soul is integrated with the body? That means that the soul is influential enough in the body where it feels organic. Well, let's be honest, our souls, which is our higher self, is not fully integrated. I mean, there's always potential that a little kid could be a tzaddik, but I mean, and of course, kids are pure and innocent. But like the real integration happens over time as we learn to channel our higher self and become more. I always say this. I'm sure you've heard me say this 1,000 times in different classes. When a baby wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning crying because he or she is hungry, right? And the mom or the dad feeds the baby never wakes up and says, "Oh, my mom is tired. Let me go back to sleep for a few hours. Let me give her a rest." Never does that. But I will bet you as an adult, when you wanted or even needed something, there was a time when you didn't bother the other person and said, "You know what? You wanted it. Let it go. Let it go." A baby doesn't. Why? I'm calling it because the divine side, again, is not a judgment. As we get older, we're able to bargain. Bargain means we're able to override, overlook things. We're able to use our mind to say, I know I feel like I need it. I really want it, but it's okay also. It's okay. I can let it go. I know the child needs to eat. The baby needs to eat. I get it for survival. But could it maybe wait another 30 minutes? Could it wait another 30 minutes? Imagine the mom is like just hitting her stride in her sleep and she needs just another 30 minutes. Would we even expect it? Of course not. What would be the input that the baby would even know that there's a mother that has her needs, etc.? That's what I mean when I say the godly soul is not fully integrated. Is there a godly soul there? Of course. Are children more innocent and pure than adults? Yes. But integration on that level, that's what bar mitzvah is and bat mitzvah is. It's like when you become a little bit more mature to be able to make healthier decisions, hopefully healthier spiritually, etc., all around the board decisions. So the point of this is that it is so soul and body, they are matched at conception. So there's a match there. So on the one hand, it's there. On the other hand, it's not fully gelled and integrated until the process moves along. So even in pregnancy, there is a process. Right? 40 days, 3 months, etc., different trimesters. Then you have birth. Oh, that's like a milestone. Then you have the naming or the brit, and then you have the bar mitzvah. You have different milestones of integration. And the truth is, each one of us, we're still working on it, on integrating. Can any of us say that perfectly, my God, my soul, my higher soul is definitely fully integrated within my body? Some days yes, some days no. Some days we're allowing it to integrate. Some days we're not so yielding to the higher advances. Anyway, the point of this is to say that Judaism believes that there is a process, right? The soul begins its connection, its relationship at conception, maybe even before conception, but then that is a process that continues on.
Ari, I have a big question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is this. Okay, the head can be out.
Yep.
But it's not breathing. It might be dead. It might remain dead. It might not be alive ever. So
Right.
how could you say that this that this baby should, or whatever, fetus, I don't know what you call it at that point, even though the head is out, it doesn't have the soul, that doesn't have the life, the breath of life in it. That's my objection to that to that Mishnah back there.
Good. So instead of asking as a question, let's play it out. Let's play it out.
Okay. I just want you to have that in mind.
If we consider murder, killing, to be the forced separation of body and soul, right? What is that? That means body and soul separate. If we consider murder, killing someone, to be the forced separation, where somebody, another party, forces them apart, right, through a violent act or whatever it is. So then the question is, what constitutes, at what stage is murder viable? That's the question. At what stage does that constitute, right? If the soul's connection, the soul's more tenuous connection with the body, right, in the womb, where it's only the light is shining over its head, above its head. If they were to be sundered, if they were to be split apart at that stage, would that be murder? Would it not be murder? Is the life, here's the question, is the life of the fetus a full life or is it not a full life? This becomes a core debate. If you say that the basic association of soul with body, even if it's not fully integrated, right? But the basic association means there's a body and a soul and you can't rip it apart. That's one take. If you say that even though they're there, as long as they're not fully integrated, let's say full integration, or at least the first stage of full integration happens at birth, then you might say, well, then that not until birth is there a problem. If you say that there's another stage in between conception and birth, well, then you would move the marker there. But understand that halacha and Jewish, I don't know what to call it, it's not philosophy, but kind of Jewish thought around conception and souls and bodies and fetuses, etc., that gives us language almost to articulate the questions, the legal questions that we might be wondering about. So we're now going to see that this very question is the subject of a major debate between two of the most well-known commentaries. And the commentaries, and I would bet that everyone's heard of them, Rashi, the great biblical commentary, and Rambam, Maimonides, the great Jewish physician, philosopher, and halachic authority. Two giants of the medieval era. Rashi was born in the 1100s, Maimonides in the 1200s. Basically, within a few decades of each other, they lived. And Rashi was from France. Rambam was from Spain. Famously, Rambam, Maimonides, his whole family, they emigrated, they ran away from Spain with the rise of the radical Almohads, which was a radical sect of Islam that was taking over the country. They emigrated, and as did many Jews, they moved to North Africa. He moved across Northern Africa, settled in Egypt, and he became the royal physician, amongst other things. That's Maimonides' story. Rashi stayed in France and had a long and productive life there, writing his famous commentaries on both the Torah, the Bible, as well as the Talmud. Both giants in Torah scholarship and commentary, and yet they have two very different takes on the Mishnah. And this becomes extremely important, to the point that even today, different rabbis will side with either or position. So here we go. And I'm going to do the readings now. And text 4a, we're going to start with text 4a, which is where we're up to. Text 4a, if you look at it closely, you'll see is a repeat of text 1. And the reason that we're doing this is just so that we don't have to turn the page. See, look at that. I'm making it convenient. I'm quoting the same Mishnah, but putting it right there so that it's easy to reference. Text 4a. I copied and pasted it. It better be the same. Here we go. Text 4a. If a woman in labor has a life, none of this is new, has a life-threatening difficulty, one dismembers the embryo within her, removing it limb by limb, for her life takes precedence over its life. But once its greater part head has emerged, it may not be harmed, for we do not set aside one life for another. That is the ruling of the Mishnah. But the question is why? Rashi, in his commentary on the Talmud, Sanhedrin, which is a different tractate, but which also quotes the Mishnah that we just read, Rashi over there comments and says the following. He says, why? Why do we perform the abortion? Why do we do this? He says the reason is, text 4b, is that a fetus is not a nefesh. Lav nefesh hu. So he says, it's not a nefesh. What's nefesh? What does the word nefesh mean? Soul. So in parentheses, I put a full living soul. That's the implication of what Rashi is saying. A fetus is not a full life. He doesn't say a fetus has no life. That wouldn't be true. Antoninus would say, well, then the meat's going to spoil. It has to have a soul, at least in association with it. It has to have some sort of spiritual preservative, but full soul, full life, a fetus is not a full life. That is what Rashi says, how he explains the Talmud. And that is why the Talmud, the Reisha versus the Seifa, that explains the two cases of the Mishnah, text 4a. Case number one in the Reisha is, so the mother's life is equally threatened in both cases. But in case number one, the child has not yet been born, even though the mom is in labor. In that case, we say you perform the abortion. Why? Because so long as the baby is not born, lav nefesh hu, it's not a full life. And if it's not a full life, what you're doing is you're pitting. Only one can survive. The life of the mother, she's a full life because she was born, versus the life of the fetus, which although alive is not a full life, and therefore you go full life versus not full life. The not full life yields to the full life when you perform the abortion. Whereas the moment the child is born, right, even those first moments of birth, now you have a full life versus a full life. You don't take any life, you don't take one life for another life. That's not what you do. You don't kill someone to save another one. That's not how we roll. That's how Rashi looks at the Mishnah. Make sense? Yes? Yes? Did I lose everyone? No? Is it overly simple? Okay, text 4c. That's Rashi. Here we have Rambam, Maimonides. Maimonides has a different understanding, and he says the following, text 4c. This is Rambam in his Hilchot Rotzeach, his laws of murder. And he writes the following paragraph. This too is a negative commandment. What? Here we go. Not to have compassion on the life of a pursuer. In Hebrew, we term this person a rodef. That's an important word to know in halacha. Rodef. Rodef is a pursuer. Therefore, the sages rule that when a woman has difficulty in labor, one may dismember the embryo within her, either with drugs or surgery, because it is like a pursuer seeking to kill her. But once the head has emerged, he may not be harmed. For we do not set aside one life for another. This is the natural course of the world. Says Rambam, there's a different way to understand this. And it's not that the fetus is less of a life than the mother. The fetus could be a full life also. He disagrees with Rashi. The fetus might be a full life. The reason that you perform the abortion, the reason why the Mishnah says you abort the fetus, if the mother's life is in danger, is because why is the mom's life in danger? Because of the pregnancy, because of the fetus. And there's halacha, and there's a halacha of rodef. Halacha of rodef is if one party is pursuing the other to take their life, they lose the protection of the status, the protectionary status of life, which says that you can't take a life. If someone is pursuing life, then they now become, then it's a mitzvah actually to take out the pursuer. This is true, not only if they're intentionally pursuing someone to murder them, this is true if it's unintentional. 9/11, when 9/11 happened, right? So airplanes were hijacked. Ask a simple question. What if we knew what was happening? We didn't know. It all happened too fast. What if we knew? What if there was God forbid, whatever. What if there was a plane and we knew what was happening? It was hijacked and the terrorists were going to fly it into the world weeks. And we could have scrambled F-15s and taken the plane out of the sky. And you had to make the call. What would you say? Take out the plane. Yeah, take out the plane. Okay. The counter argument is you're killing 250 passengers.
That's what they
The passengers took it down, right? But I'm asking if the country, the president or whoever it is, has to make the call. You take down the plane or you don't. You shoot it out of the sky, you don't. So one argument says 100% shoot it out of the sky. Why? Because it's going to hit a tower, cause all sorts of havoc. The counter argument is, why do you kill one life to save another life? Since when do you kill, we said you don't take one life to save another life. First of all, okay, fine. Halacha would say the following. Halacha might say the following. I don't know for sure. Might say that even though, who says you take one life to save another life? Since the plane is the pursuer, it's the threat, it's the bullet in this case, right? It's the missile. It's transformed into a missile now, headed straight toward, toward towers. So it now becomes a rodave. The whole plane and all the passengers become a rodave. You're gonna tell me it's aside from 2 guys, 4 guys, whatever it is, I don't know, or on each one. But aside from 1 or 2 guys, everyone else is innocent. A rodave doesn't imply guilt. A rodave implies a status, a reality. The reality is, if this party is a pursuer of life, they become a rodave, and a rodave is not protected under the do not take life under any circumstances, and you actually do take the life of a rodave to protect the innocent victim of the rodave. Getting back to this situation, Rambam says, in a very interesting twist of understanding the whole the law of the Mishnah, Rambam says, Maimonides says the following: the reason why you perform the abortion is because the fetus is a rodave. Fetus is a rodave. What, it wants to kill? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't want. But reality is, it is being it's threatening the life of the mother. And halacha says you take out the threat. It's innocent. It didn't mean it. It doesn't know it. It doesn't matter. You take out the life of the innocent. Once the child is born, now it's a little bit different. Who's rodave? You with me? Who's rodaving who once the child is born?
Is it in the Talmud, or is it just commentary or rabbi saying that it's theoretical that somebody else can't abort the child, but the mother could abort the child when the head is crowned because the child is the rodave of the mother?
I've never heard that. It's
Never seen that.
I haven't. Doesn't mean that it's not written. It just means that I haven't seen it. Just a general rule is just because I don't know it doesn't mean it's not true. It's interesting. I haven't heard it. That she herself could. To me, that sounds like based on the logic. I don't know how that would say, because she would say that this to me he's a rodave, or she, whatever, the child. I don't know. That's interesting. I understand what you're saying. Anyway, but either way, the Mishnah rules that after birth, then it's not clear as to who is the rodave of who, and therefore you don't take one life for the other if you're not sure who's chasing who. Now, in the womb, it's a little. I guess there's a little bit more clarity. Maybe you couple it also with Rashi's commentary a little bit, but bottom line is that Rambam prefers the issue of rodave over the fact of saying that the fetus is not a full nefesh, which means that what the implication is that the Rambam could believe that a fetus is a full life, 100% a full life, and yet, since it's a rodave, that's why you take it. Rashi says that no, the reason why you abort is because the fetus is not a nefesh, is not a full living soul. Understand this, that based on these two positions, we have some very interesting implications regarding our third case study. If you recall, the third case study is there were 2 sisters. There's Anne, who needed a bone marrow transplant, yeah, and her sister Leah, who can provide the donor bone marrow, but who's pregnant, and therefore that's not going to work. If she's pregnant, they need to abort the fetus. They need to abort the pregnancy, terminate the pregnancy, and then she can be a donor. And our question was, well, do you perform the abortion to save a life? It's not the mother's life. And how important was it in the Mishnah scenario that it was the mother as opposed to any life that was at risk? Well, now we have some clarity. According to Rashi, the key thing here is that the fetus is not a full life. And therefore, you abort the fetus in the face. If the question is a full life versus a non-full life, and I even hate using these words, but a full life, i.e. a born life versus an unborn life, Rashi says, the born life takes precedence. Well, if that's the truth, right? Then what would we do? What would we say? We would say in the case of the aunt,
yeah,
from the abortion, because the fetus, the pregnancy is not full life. And we might even say that it doesn't even matter what trimester it's in, because in the case of the Mishnah, it's up even until labor, right? You dismember the limbs, says the Mishnah, even the moments right before birth. The bottom line is until birth, lav nefesh, says Rashi. In the Mishnah's case, it's not a full life. Therefore, if a full life is at risk because of the fetus, or even indirectly, then maybe we say, that's it. You sacrifice the life or the potential life of the fetus to save the full life of the ant. And you do the procedure and you perform the abortion, and Leah gives the bone marrow donation, and hopefully Anne receives it and lives. Whereas, according to Rambam, according to Maimonides, who says that the issue is rodef, the fetus is not rodefing anyone here.
Right.
The fetus is not. You're telling me, oh no. The fetus is a rodef because of the fetus, whatever. Because the fetus, the mother, Leah, can't be a donor to the ant. That fetus is not at all causing Anne's cancer. That's not at all, that you cannot draw that back to the fetus. You're saying the fetus, I mean, it's way too indirect to call that a rodef. The fetus is not a rodef to the ant. That's not at all what's threatening the life of the ant. You could argue the ant is a rodef to the fetus, exactly. Who's rodefing who, right? That's the same way. So therefore, we say the following. Therefore, we say, according to Rashi, and again, you have two different perspectives, and both would agree with the ruling of the Mishnah. But the question is, based on the rationale, how do you then apply it out in the real world? How do you apply it into other cases? And this is going to become, we're going to go through a number of cases now, real life situations, and try to apply these two positions. But in short, Rashi's position is that the reason why the Mishnah says the abortion is permitted and even obligatory is because lav nefesh, it's not a full soul. In that case, you have much more allowance in other cases of abortion. Whereas Rambam says, no, it's because of the narrow scenario that this fetus is a rodef to the mother, and therefore would only apply in a very narrow situation where the pregnancy endangers the very life of the mother. This becomes...
Rabbi Ari.
Yes.
Somewhere, I think Rashi said this, something about how your blood is not more red than theirs.
The Talmud says that.
The Talmud says, okay.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that apply
to rodef?
Not the non-rodef situation.
Yeah.
In other words, yeah, to say it's not a full soul.
Yeah.
Wouldn't the counter argument to that be, who says your blood is, and that you have the right to abort it so the sister can get the bone marrow transplant? But who says her blood is more red than the fetus's?
Oh, that's exactly the point. You only say who says your blood is redder if you're talking about full life and full life. If you're talking about full life, which would be the ant, and not full life, the fetus, then you do say one blood is redder than the other blood, because literally one is a full life, one is not a full life. So correct. The only context in which the Talmud says who says your blood is redder than the other one is a situation where a guy came to Rava and he says to Rava, I'm in a predicament because some guy came over to me and says, I need to kill someone else or else he's going to kill me. What do I do? And Rava says, you cannot kill an innocent third party because who says your blood is redder than his blood? That's the case for two born people where everybody in conversation had been born. And therefore it's equal footing. According to Rashi, the unborn is not a full soul. And therefore we could say, and Rashi may say, Rashi doesn't clearly talk about the case study 3, the case of Anne. But Rashi could say, and perhaps would say, it seems like he would say, that in that situation, since a full life is on the line, you abort the fetus in order to save the full life, and you don't apply the principle that you would otherwise apply, which is who says your blood is redder than his. But your question is exactly the point as to how we might decipher Rashi. Now, when we have these two differences of opinions that are very stark, so the first thing we want to do is look at other texts, supporting sources so we can figure out, who's right. Is it Rashi? Is it Rambam? And as we'll see, it'll be a little inconclusive, but let's go through the journey. Now we're up to text 5. I'm going to read this. Here we go. Text number 5. This is again a quote from the Talmud. Said Rabbi Nachman in the name of Shmuel. Okay, when a woman dies on the Sabbath, on Shabbat, while she is on the birth stool, one brings a knife to cut open her abdomen and remove, i.e., save the fetus, even if he must carry the knife by way of the public domain. In other words, we violate Shabbat, carry the knife, do whatever it takes to save the fetus. Does that imply that the fetus is a full life or not a full life? What do you think?
Full life.
Right, so does this text support, discussion question, does this text support Rashi's position that the fetus is not a full life, or Rambam's position that it is a full life?
Full life.
Full life, right, that's why you violate Shabbat, to save a full life. The counter argument, the reason why this is not so conclusive is that one could say very simply that the reason why you do this in this situation is because the mother already died, she passed away, which means that the fetus at this point is a full life, because we only say the fetus is not a full life because it's living by virtue of the mother giving it life. Whereas in this case, the mother is deceased already. Therefore, by definition, even though this fetus has not been born, it's not really living off of the life of the mother, because the mother is no longer alive. Therefore, we could say that even according to Rashi, at this stage, when the mother dies, the fetus is a full life at this point, and therefore you save a full life on Shabbat. Bring the knife on Shabbat by way of public domain, whatever it takes to cut open and pull out the fetus. So text 5, but text 5 is being ruled inconclusive. It seems like it's supporting Rambam's opinion. Sorry, it seems like it's supporting, Rambam's opinion that the fetus is a full life. But on second thought, it could even support Rashi's opinion. Even Rashi might agree that in this scenario, you violate Shabbat to save the life of the fetus. Text number 6. Let's look at the next text. Okay, this is again from the Talmud. All of our quotes, by the way, from the Talmud. All verifiable, all legit sources. Number 6, text 6, a very interesting case. If a pregnant woman smelled food on Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur is coming up, so these are some practical laws. If she smelled food on Yom Kippur and developed a craving for that food, one must feed her until she regains her senses. Does that mean? It's not talking about a standard craving. It's about a craving that is bordering dangerous. Is that possible? It seems like it's possible. I don't know the medical part of it. It seems like it's possible that if she had a craving that she wouldn't have, it could be dangerous. Therefore, we say you violate Yom Kippur and she eats, etc. So, discussion question, does this text support Rashi's position? Or does it support Rambam's position? What do you think? Does it support that the fetus is a full life or not a full life? What do you think?
I'm thinking.
Remember, we're saying that you feed the mom, essentially you give her the food, which, well, I guess it's the question is why does she eat? If it's to save the life, if it's to feed the fetus, as it were, to feed her pregnancy, well, then we're saying that you violate Yom Kippur for the fetus, for the unborn, which seems to imply that the unborn is a status of worthy of violating Yom Kippur for the counter argument. So it seems like Rambam, the counter argument is, no, maybe even Rashi would agree in this case that you feed the mom, not for the sake of the fetus, but for the sake of the mother. It could also be dangerous for the mother not to have food when she's craving it. Therefore,
So Rabbi Sollish, so it's not pregnant women in Yom Kippur cannot eat unless just have to follow Yom Kippur as anyone else, unless they have a craving, or they can. I thought pregnant women could eat.
Yeah, no, you are correct. Actually, the actual ruling in halacha is way more lenient than this Talmudic passage would appear. Pregnant and nursing women, you have to speak to a Rav to make sure to check in, depending on what's going on with the specifics. But in general, pregnant and or nursing moms there are way more allowances on Yom Kippur, not only in a case where there's a craving that's whatever, that's dangerous.
Okay.
If in general she's weak and in general it's a dangerous situation, then, or even potentially dangerous, then we would waive Yom Kippur. And the point is that it's not, I mean, let's take out the word craving. Let's ask that very question. Let's say her fasting would endanger the life of the fetus. Should she fast anyway? The answer is no. She needs to eat in order to maintain her pregnancy. It's not a full soul. Rashi is not a full soul. So maybe this implies that it is a full life, because that's why you're violating Yom Kippur, to save a full life. So the counter would be no. Maybe it's also to protect the life of the mom. Maybe her eating is not just for the fetus, for the pregnancy, but it's also for herself, for her own health and well-being. And therefore, we could say that maybe the pregnancy, the fetus is not a full life, and yet we still override Yom Kippur for that. The final text that we're going to look at, as far as a proof text, perhaps one way or the other, is going to be text 7a, and then the commentary on text 7b. So text 7a comes from the book of Exodus. It's a quote from the Torah, from Scripture, and it says the following: if men quarrel together, right, so imagine two guys brawling, and they end up hurting a woman with child, meaning a pregnant woman, so that her fruit, and this is the way the Torah describes it, it's very literal, so that her fruit depart, and yet no harm follows. Her fruit departs means that she miscarries.
But
So-
she's okay.
Well, let's hold on one second. But this is the quote: and yet no harm follows. He shall surely be fined and pay as the judges determine. So there's a financial penalty. But if any harm follows, you shall give a life for life capital punishment. And so the question is, what does it mean that her fruit departs, but no harm follows? Isn't that harm? So, as Frank pointed out, probably the implication of no harm follows means there's no harm to the mom. And that is correct. That is the way that it's understood by all the commentators. There's not a dissenting position on this one. So again, the scenario is two guys are fighting and they're punching each other. Somehow a pregnant woman is there or gets caught in the crossfire, as it were, and she gets assaulted and she miscarries, but she's okay. In other words, she doesn't die, right? She's injured, obviously, and harmed and miscarries. So then there is a financial penalty. It wouldn't be a capital case. It wouldn't be like murder. But if any harm follows, i.e. if she passes away, if the mother passes away, then you shall give a life for life. Then there's a possibility, whether it's applied or not, that's obviously up to the circumstance and the evidence, but potentially it is now a capital case, capital punishment about a life for a life. So it would seem pretty clear. Oh, and let's just verify this with the commentary text 7b. What does it mean? Yet no harm follows refers to the harm to the woman. And that's exactly what you said, Frank, right? He shall surely be fined refers to the compensation for the loss of the fetus. So in a case where she miscarries, and I'm sorry, I didn't pull this up here on the screen. Sorry, we just read text 7b. So in the case, again, there's two cases in the Torah. There's a resh and a seifa. The first case of the Torah, it's where there's a miscarriage, but the mom is okay. Then there's a financial consequence. Where in the second situation, there's a tragedy, as the Torah describes it, where the mom dies, and then now it's murder. Now it's a capital case, etc. So the question is, does this text support Rashi's position or Rambam's position? Are we implying that the fetus is a full life or not a full life?
Saying it only applies to the mom, not the fetus. When it says so that the fruit depart yet cause
No. Not a full life, I'm thinking.
Right. Hold on, but one second, Jen.
Like you're talking about just the mother, if the mother died.
Correct, because the first case, there's two cases. The first case already said her fruit depart, which is the euphemism for miscarriage, but yet no harm. So she miscarried, sorry, but yet no harm follows. What does that mean? There was harm in the miscarriage. It means no harm to her. She survived. She survived the assault. So she got struck, she miscarries, but she'll make it. So then there's a financial penalty. Maybe we even call it a criminal thing, but it's not murder. It's not like murder one. It's not like it's not a capital case. Whereas in the second case, but if any harm follows, again, it's written vaguely, but that's the understanding. If any harm follows means that if the mom loses, if this mother loses her life, then now you should give a life for life. In other words, now it's in the category he's two guys. He can now be charged with murder. So again, it seems to imply, so not again, sorry. So now the question is, so does this imply like Rashi that a fetus is not a full life, or like Rambam that a fetus is a full life? And what's the answer? Irena, you said it. It's not a full life. If it was a full life, then even the first case would be a capital case, right? If you said, and literally, didn't you say this before? No, who said, did you say it or did Mark say it? Maybe Mark mentioned this. I forget already who said this. Mark, maybe you mentioned this. Like in some states, who mentioned in some states that if you, an embryo IVF, you could be charged with murder or whatever it is. Oh, you mentioned this.
Because the fetal personhood laws.
Correct. So that's exactly what we don't say in halacha. It's like all these new questions that come up. Been there 3,000 years ago. We already had this 3,300 years ago. This is in the 5 books of Moses, my bar mitzvah parsha. I read this not knowing what I was even saying. That was my bar mitzvah Torah portion, Mishpat. Right there, Exodus 21. We literally.
I remember it well.
Yeah, as you would. The point is that we literally say that if God forbid, all of this is God forbid, but if somebody causes a miscarriage, there's a penalty, but it's not murder. Whereas if the mom's life is taken, then it is a murder case. Who was I speaking to once recently? She said her husband, he's a judge, or he was involved in a case. Maybe he was a lawyer before he became judge. He was a lawyer on a case where a drunk driver caused an accident, and I don't know. I'm not going to remember it, so there's no point to start it. I don't remember all the nuances of the case. Anyway, but it was along these lines, right? Like the pregnancy was, she miscarried, but she was okay. I don't know. Halacha says, Torah clearly says that murder does not apply in the case of the loss of the fetus, right? Literally, the Mechilta, the Midrash Mishpatim says, he shall surely be fined, refers to compensation for the loss of the fetus. There are consequences for the miscarriage, 100%. And you call it criminal, financial, whatever language you want to use, it's fine, but it's not murder. So the question is, does the text support Rashi's or Rambam's position? It seems to support Rashi's. It's not a full life. Yet at the same time, it's not conclusive. Because we could say, like Rambam, even Rambam would agree to this case. Why? Because even if you say it is a full life, maybe you could say, oh, no, it's not going to work. Say it's not intentional, but then it wouldn't be intentional for the mom's life either. That wouldn't hold.
I feel like this one actually is pretty conclusive.
Pretty conclusive? Well, Jews can make an argument for anything. Just give enough time, we'll find one. No, maybe you could say that he didn't realize she was pregnant. So maybe on that, maybe there's some level of unintentional on that. But for the mom herself, it is more intentional. I don't know if intellectually and like listen. I've listened to enough true crime podcasts in my day to know this stuff. But I don't know. This may be a little bit more conclusive than the other ones. But here we have it. So all of this aside, considering all of this. Let's now move on to the final rulings. In modern times, we have 2 giants of halacha who passed away over the last, few decades, but not that long ago. In the 20th century, these were giants. One is Rabbi Moshe Feinstein from the Lower East Side, and one Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg from Israel. And they each take respective opinions. One takes Rashi, one takes Rambam. Rabbi Feinstein from the Lower East Side, he prefers the Rambam's approach, which says that the fetus is a full life, which obviously means that in general, when he was asked about questions of abortion, he would take a stricter view. And these questions came up with regards to Tay-Sachs, which is a very devastating genetic disease that many Ashkenazi Jews have. And the question was, what if Tay-Sachs is discovered while during pregnancy? Are you permitted, according to Jewish law, to abort? Right? Doesn't matter at what stage, etc. Rabbi Feinstein taking on the view of Rambam that the fetus is a life, took a stricter stance. Rabbi Waldenberg took a more lenient stance. Rabbi Waldenberg said it's not a full life. He took Rashi's opinion, and he said that if coupled with that, obviously just because it's not a full life doesn't mean that in all cases, but if you couple that with severe distress to the parents in having a child with Tay-Sachs and dealing with a devastating genetic disease like that, so Rabbi Waldenberg saw some room for leniency in halacha, in Jewish law, for abortion in those scenarios. And whereas Rabbi Feinstein was a little bit more on the strict side, and he advocated actually for pre-marriage genetic screening, which gave rise to the first genetic screening that I believe was done in a comprehensive way, Dar Yesharim, which is a very within the Orthodox community, it's been going on for decades. I remember when I first went away to yeshiva, 1995 it would have been. I got to London, and like within the first few months, somebody was there. Dar Yesharim, the group was going around. They would draw some blood, they would run it, genetically test. You would get a code. You get a like a number, and then when it came time to date, you would call a hotline. You would give your number and their number, and they would either say thumbs up or thumbs down. That was it. Very, very anonymous, very what's it called again? Very protecting, very confidential. It was like, because only both are carriers for Tay-Sachs is a problem. So they would either say yes, it's fine, green light, which obviously most cases it was green lit, and some cases not. But that's born of this desire to avoid having issues with pregnancy and then questions about abortion. The next
green light for dating. Make sure you say that. It's before you even date.
Yes, that is a very good point, Mom. Before one even dates, they would do that just to make sure that the dating, because you don't want to fall in love with someone and then be like, okay, we got some genetic issues. By the way, now we have a J Screen locally, right? J Screen that does an amazing job. They do hundreds of genetic tests, and they tell you your results. There's some pros and cons to that. Some people don't want to know their whole workup. They just want to know, can I safely marry this other person? Like, don't tell me my whole thing. Just have to carry around that worry. You know, Jews and worry. Got plenty of our own anxieties anyway, right? So like, all right, moving on. Text number 8. I know we're at the time. We're just going to go for another 2 minutes here. Text number 8 is a case of bleeding during pregnancy. A woman is bleeding profusely. What's up? A woman is bleeding profusely during pregnancy. Her life is in danger. The doctor determines that in order to attempt a procedure which might stop the bleeding, the fetus must be removed. However, the doctor is not certain whether the condition is caused by the pregnancy or whether it is an independent condition rendered more difficult to treat because of the presence of the fetus. Thus, removal of the fetus might or may not help her condition. But when we remove the fetus, and the possibility that it may save her life. In other words, the fetus, in this case, may not be the rodef. The case of the Mishnah was the fetus that was endangering the life of the parent, of the mom. In this case, it's not the fetus may not, it may be a completely separate issue. Not the pregnancy may not be causing the harm to the mother. In this case, what do? Again, it goes back to the question of Rashi versus Maimonides. According to Rashi's position, termination of this pregnancy would be allowed. Why? Because the fetus is not a full life. Mom's life is in danger, even though the fetus is not necessarily a rodef, but it's fine. According to Rambam, it's only in a very narrow, much more narrow situation where there is a rodef scenario. And again, just getting back to the text, which text did we have that? It was text number, case study 3, correct? With the and. So according to Rashi, Leah would be allowed to abort to save the full life of her sister because her pregnancy, her fetus, is not a full life. Whereas according to Maimonides, it's likely that Leah would not be allowed to do that because the fetus is not a rodef to the aunt. Now, the rabbi who was asked this had a solution, Rabbi Halpern. He said, even if you want to be strict like Maimonides, I have a solution, he says. This is what you do. You begin the transplant. You begin the bone marrow transplant. And if Leah's life, the mother's life, is in any way becomes endangered in the process, because of the pregnancy, well, now the fetus is a rodef to the mom, not just to the aunt. You with me? You start the procedure, and if the fetus is now endangering the life of the mom, now the fetus is a rodef, and then according to all opinions, you can terminate. And if not, then great, then you did the procedure either way. So that's a way to make sure that it's kosher, as it were, according to all positions. All right, with this, we conclude the analysis. And I think that what we've come to see is that, when you think about like the religious perspective, religion's perspective on abortion, oftentimes you think of this very strict or, unmoving, unyielding, life begins at conception or whatever it is, and that sort of thing. And we see that Judaism is way, I don't know if the right word is flexible, but it just has a completely different take. When does life begin? Bit of a moving target. Is a fetus a full life? Not really sure. Not sure. Depends who you ask. Rashi seems to say no. He says it clearly, not lav nefesh. It's not a nefesh. It's not fully integrated. Rambam seems to say a little bit more. We need a rodef element to it as well. And the way this presents in real life is you have rabbis today. Some take a more cautious approach. Some take a less cautious approach. Obviously, it would also factor into when, before a certain amount of time, before 40 days, right, which is about 6 weeks. The Talmud says is kamaya ba'alma. It's only like liquid anyway. So you would have more. You would have more. Either way,
That saying, he used to think that saying meant that the soul came in at 40 days, but that's not the case.
correct. It's associated, but it's a process, and the process is a process. Now, does that mean that within the 40 days, for any reason, again, from even according to the opinions that we're citing, the idea is that life is sacred, and therefore, once you're on a path toward life, we try to do everything that we can reasonably to ensure a safe passage through the journey. If there's a compelling reason to interrupt, okay, so halacha would look at it. Halacha would say, okay, what's the compelling reason? What are we interrupting? What's the stage? What's at stake? What are the scenarios? And then make a call based on what's going on. But there is a framework. I think that's the beauty of Judaism and halacha, is that you have this tradition that has a lot of scholarship and a framework that I think, has, at least within its unit, makes sense. One final point to say, because this was mentioned in passing, but it's important to note. Pre-implanted embryos, right? Fertilized in a lab. We had the story in Alabama, I don't know, a year ago, whatever it was. Somebody opened up the freezer in an IVF lab and it reached in, didn't realize it was not just cold, like a standard freezer, like let me grab the ice cream. This is insanely cold. And broke, smashed, whatever, caught a bunch of embryos, destroying embryos. And in Alabama, they ruled that it was essentially taking a life, right? Taking the life of a child. And halacha would have the exact opposite. We said life begins at conception on some level, but it's only when it's on a path to birth. A fertilized egg, embryo, etc., pre-embryo in a freezer is not on a path. There's no path. If you let it sit, it sits. An embryo, a fetus in the mother is on a path. Let it sit. 9 months later, typically, it's born. Something in a freezer, that's on a different path. It's on a path nowhere. Halacha would say, not that you necessarily go around destroying things, but that it's not a violation, you're not destroying life. I know it's a very drastic distinction. You think about religious perspectives on life and sanctity of life. Judaism could not have a more different position than other major religions on that specific piece. So everything we spoke about tonight was assuming that a mother is pregnant and is on a path toward, given time, path toward birthing a child. And that's where the question comes in. I want to make sure to clarify that. All right, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Hope you found it interesting, enjoyable, compelling, the conversation, and we honor life and we pray for health and happiness for all of us. L'chaim. To life.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
Do you compel Leah, the sister, to save her?
You don't, not in practical halacha, because there, according to Rambam might say no, don't do it.
And the other question is,
Rabbi Halpern said the way around it is start the procedure,
right?
And if there's any challenge, then it's going to be erotic to the mother. But your question is, do you have to do it? And what I'm saying is likely not, because it's a bit of a now. Hold on, I understand your question, but at the end of the day, you could save the life of the sister. So do you do it, and do you set up? I don't know. Oh, there you go. In general, when it comes to organ donation or marriage, you don't. It's not demanded. Although that itself is a question. If it's to save a life, why isn't it demanded?
Right.
The answer is typically like this. There's no obligation to put yourself at risk to save another. Now, is it a mitzvah? Sure, but a mitzvah doesn't mean in this case it would mean good deed, not obligation. There's no mitzvah, for example, to donate a kidney because it's a loss of limb and it's putting yourself on some level at risk. So there's no mitzvah to do that. Mitzvah, it is a good deed, but there's no obligation to do it. And in this case, the question is, undergoing this procedure and potentially necessitating the termination of the pregnancy, which is at the very least the loss of limb, a loss of something, would that be required? The answer would be no. I think that would be, I feel confident enough to say that would not be required.
So, Rabbi,
yeah.
So, like, let's say that you are, or that there is a rabbi that, I don't know, what would you call it? I think that, works on bioethics things.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do you have to have one position or the other, or you can,
You're asking an excellent question that gets to no. She's asking another question. I think it's an even better question than that. The question is, can one Rav have within his own repertoire both opinions?
Yes,
and pull it out when needed. The answer is a good Rav does exactly that.
Okay.
And we'll ask you, tell me who you are, tell me where you're coming from, and you can have the same rabbi give two different psaks, which means two different decisions to two different people based on a whole litany of things.
Okay.
This comes up not in just medical ethics, but in every area of halacha. Somebody says, how do I kosher a dishwasher? So someone might get the answer, better not to. Some will get the answer, here's how to do it. It's just because there are in every area of halacha, there are many different opinions. And although there's kind of a path that is woven, but there is still room for negotiation. And that's why I was careful, at least I try to be careful to say that I was comparing and contrasting Rabbi Feinstein and Rabbi Waldenberg. Typically, Rabbi Feinstein was stricter and Rabbi Waldenberg was a little bit more lenient when it comes to this, more permissive when it comes to abortion. That's typically, but again, every Rav, a good Rav, is never going to be locked in because they know that there's a position, even if they personally think that you typically lean like Rambam, that it is a full life. Rashi still exists. It's not like Rabbi Feinstein doesn't know about Rashi. In certain situations, you can lean on that when needed, and so you have that variance. It was a very good question that you asked. And it's important to know how the halachic process works. It's not one size fits all. It's not monolithic. Thank you. There's a lot of room.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the question. I still have my question about taking a breath. I thought halacha says a person something's not alive until it takes a breath. I mean, a fetus. a
it
baby,
says-
whatever.
Take care. See you next week. The specific language of the Mishnah is that once the head emerges, it's about the head emerging.
And so a breath has no.
I don't know. It talks about the head emerging.
Wow.
The question is, do the commentaries on the head emerging say that it has to be the head emerging up to the nose where it could take a breath? I don't know. I said before when I mentioned before that we have to look that up specifically, but
Yeah.
there
Because-
is a
Yeah, because there's different halachas. Because if a baby is born dead, God forbid, and it doesn't take a breath, and what do you do? How do you have to name it? Do you have to bury
Yeah.
it? Do you have to? So shiva.
Yeah.
It's a whole.
Yeah. True. I'm gonna see if I can look it up. I'll let you know.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's.
Yeah. All right. Good to see you
Thanks,
all.
Ari. Thank you
Lila
very
Tov,
much.
close it out. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Benna,
Thanks.
Deborah, Jeff, Diane, Mom. And I see your message. Yes, I'm definitely gonna send the recording for this. Okay, see you soon.